What happens when science fiction stops entertaining and starts shaking the system? These aren't stories of gadgets or space battles. They're films so bold they made censors, nervous studios panic, and audiences question everything. Have you ever watched a movie that felt like it wasn't meant to exist? Stay with us because these titles didn't just push limits. They broke them wide open and rewrote the rules of what science fiction could dare to say. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. Imagine an alien landing on Earth, not with lasers, but with longing. Nicholas Roeg's The Man Who Fell to Earth is a kaleidoscope of surreal images anchored by David Bowie in his first major film role. The plot follows an extraterrestrial, disguised as a man, who arrives searching for water to save his dying planet. What begins as a simple mission quickly turns into a commentary on greed, corruption, and obsession. The film's dreamlike style made it controversial from day one. Its fragmented editing, abrupt time, jumps, and lingering close-ups left censors unsure how to categorize it. Some accused it of being too suggestive, while others believed it smuggled in political criticism about corporate control and the emptiness of wealth. Several countries cut entire sequences, while in the United States distributors debated whether mainstream audiences could even handle it. Bowie himself became part of the myth. His otherworldly persona blurred with the character, and some reviewers swore he wasn't acting at all. The controversy only fueled the cult, following with fans seeing it as a daring critique of how humans destroy outsiders who threaten their systems. Over time, critics shifted from confusion to praise, hailing it as one of the most daring science fiction films of the 1970s. The legacy? The Man Who Fell to Earth proved that sci-fi could be messy, challenging, and deeply human all at once. Sometimes the strangest visions are the ones that tell us the most about ourselves. THX 1138, 1971. Before Star Wars. George Lucas terrified Hollywood with a dystopian nightmare. THX 1138 wasn't spaceships and heroics. It was a sterile underground future where individuality was forbidden, emotion was dangerous, and every movement was monitored. The film's cold white corridors and robotic voices were so unsettling that audiences didn't know what to make of it. Censors didn't either. At the time, American studios were still clinging to restrictive codes, and THX 1138's bleak tone felt like an act of rebellion. Studio executives demanded cuts, worried that its stark depictions of control would scare off audiences and spark unnecessary debate. In some regions, the film was edited to soften scenes of authority cracking down on dissent, even though those were the very sequences Lucas wanted people to wrestle with. The controversy grew because Lucas refused to handhold the audience. Instead of dramatic speeches, he gave viewers silence, long takes, and bizarre visuals that left many baffled. Critics were divided. Some called it pretentious, while others said it was a bold warning of where society could be heading. Over time, its influence became undeniable. Without THX 1138, you wouldn't have the oppressive futures of films like Brazil or even The Matrix. Lucas took a gamble, and despite studio interference, left behind a film that dared to challenge both audiences and the system. Altered States, 1980. What if science fiction turned inward instead of outward? Altered States, directed by Ken Russell, is one of the strangest journeys ever put on screen. It follows a scientist experimenting with sensory deprivation and pushing his body and mind to their breaking point. What begins as research spirals into surreal transformations, with the protagonist shifting through bizarre visions of humanity's origins. The controversy came quickly. The film's intense visuals, hallucinatory sequences of shifting shapes, faces, and primal imagery were unlike anything mainstream audiences had seen. Censors worried that the relentless imagery would disturb viewers or encourage wild interpretations. The studio reportedly clashed with Russell over scenes they considered too intense, forcing him to trim sequences and change transitions. What made Altered States especially controversial wasn't just its visuals, but its questions. It asked whether science could strip us down to our purest essence, and whether that was a place humans should even dare to go. For audiences used to straightforward space battles or robot stories, this was an unsettling detour. Critics were split. Some hailed it as visionary, while others dismissed it as self-indulgent madness. Yet its impact was clear. It inspired a wave of science fiction that used inner journeys and psychological breakdowns as metaphors, paving the way for darker explorations of the human mind. Altered States remains proof that sometimes the most frightening places science fiction explores are inside ourselves. Brazil, 1985. Imagine fighting the studio making your own movie. That's exactly what Terry Gilliam endured with Brazil, a dystopian satire so bold it nearly never saw the light of day. Set in a bureaucratic future drowning in paperwork, the film followed an ordinary man trapped in a system of endless rules, mistakes, and absurd authority. The controversy wasn't subtle. Universal Pictures hated Gilliam's bleak vision, demanding changes to make it happier and more marketable. They even created their own cut, stripping away Gilliam's intended ending. What followed was a legendary battle with Gilliam taking out ads in newspapers, mocking the studio for censoring his work. Eventually, critics' screenings of his version gained so much buzz that the studio caved and released it. Censors in other countries were no kinder. Brazil's imagery torture, masked as paperwork dream sequences of flying heroes, destroyed by endless machines as trimmed or altered depending on local sensibilities. Some governments banned it outright, labeling it as destabilizing propaganda. Yet Brazil grew into a cult classic. Audiences who connected with its absurd dark humor and chilling relevance hailed it as a masterpiece. Today it's regarded as one of the greatest science fiction films of all time. Gilliam's battle proved that sometimes the fight off-screen can be just as epic as the story on it. The 10th Victim, 1965. What if reality shows didn't just humiliate contestants but eliminated them? That's the premise of The 10th Victim, an Italian film that imagined a future where televised death games replaced traditional entertainment. Long before The Hunger Games or Battle Royale, this film dared to present violence as spectacle and asked audiences to cheer. The controversy was immediate. Some critics blasted it as irresponsible, while others praised it as brilliant satire. In certain countries, censors trimmed or delayed release, claiming its mix of flashy visuals and gleeful competition was too provocative for the time. In the United States, distributors worried it would glamorize the very thing it was mocking, and marketing campaigns downplayed its darker edge. Yet the film became a cultural touchstone. Its stylish costumes, wild set designs, and absurdly upbeat tone turned it into a strange but influential artifact. It predicted a world where entertainment and morality blurred, making people question how far audiences might go for a thrill. The 10th Victim didn't enjoy blockbuster success, but its ideas rippled across decades. Everything from reality television to dystopian franchises owes a nod to its audacity. It showed that science fiction doesn't need starships to be controversial, sometimes it just needs a mirror aimed squarely at us. Logan's Run, 1976. What if youth was worshipped but age was a crime? Logan's Run imagined a glittering future where everyone lived in domes of luxury until their 30th birthday. At that point, citizens were sent to a public ceremony called Carousel, where they were promised rebirth. In truth, it was simply the end. The film exploded onto screens during the mid-70s, and censors weren't ready for its mix of shiny escapism and chilling undertones. Scenes of the ceremony drew heavy criticism for presenting ritualized elimination as spectacle. Several countries trimmed footage worried it might disturb audiences by showing just how willingly society could embrace such a system. What really pushed boundaries was the film's bold design. Glittering costumes, glowing crystals, and elaborate sets disguised a biting commentary on consumer culture, age discrimination, and blind obedience. Critics argued whether it was escapist nonsense or one of the most subversive sci-fi stories of its decade. MGM found itself defending the film's daring imagery, insisting that the themes were philosophical, not political. Audiences were divided. Some loved its dazzling visuals and fast pace, while others left theaters unsettled by how easily Logan's world mirrored their own obsession with youth. The idea of culling citizens at 30 felt absurd, but also uncomfortably close to real-world fears about how society treats aging populations. Logan's Run remains a cult classic not just because of its futuristic spectacle, but because it forced viewers to ask, what's the true cost of a society that fears growing old? Solaris, 1972. Science fiction doesn't always roar, it can whisper. Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris traded spaceships and action for something more haunting, the loneliness of space and the ghosts of memory. The story follows a psychologist sent to a space station orbiting a mysterious planet. Instead of aliens, he finds the station haunted by physical manifestations of the crew's repressed memories. Censors in the Soviet Union didn't know what to make of it. On one hand, it was a prestigious project meant to rival Western science fiction. On the other, its slow pace and deeply human themes didn't fit neatly into the model of triumphant state-approved storytelling. Reports claim several scenes were ordered trimmed for being too abstract or too personal. Tarkovsky, never one to compromise, fought bitterly to keep his vision intact. Internationally, audiences expecting action were stunned by its meditative style. Some critics dismissed it as too slow, but others praised it as one of the most profound explorations of grief and memory in science fiction. In Japan and parts of Europe, distributors even shortened the film, fearing casual moviegoers would abandon it halfway. Today, Solaris stands as a towering masterpiece often called the Russian answer to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Its controversy wasn't about explosions or costumes, but about how far a film could push patience, silence, and emotion into the realm of science fiction. Planet of the Apes, 1968. Few endings hit like this one. Planet of the Apes begins as a survival story on a strange world ruled by intelligent apes, but it ends with a shocking revelation that left censors and audiences alike shaken. The film dared to hold up a mirror to humanity's own destructive path, while the ape makeup and action sequences drew attention. It was the ending Charlton Heston discovering the ruins of the Statue of Liberty that caused the biggest stir. Some boards argued that such a grim conclusion was unpatriotic or too unsettling for general audiences. Discussions raged about whether to soften the impact or change the tone entirely. In several countries, the Ape Society's rigid class system was interpreted as political commentary, and censors bristled. The Soviet Union delayed release, claiming it mirrored their own social hierarchies too closely. Even in the United States, the studio nervously debated how to market a movie that ended not with triumph, but despair. Despite the controversy, Planet of the Apes became a sensation. Its ending is still one of the most famous twists in cinema history, and the debates it sparked only fueled its legacy. It proved that science fiction could deliver a gut punch as powerful as any drama, leaving audiences to argue long after the credits rolled. Zardoz, 1974. Sean Connery in red boots and a bizarre future cult. What could possibly go wrong? Zardoz, directed by John Boorman, is one of the strangest sci-fi films ever made, and its road through censorship only made it more legendary. The story drops viewers into a fractured future, where an immortal elite live in luxury while the rest of humanity suffers. Connery plays a rebel who infiltrates their world, uncovering uncomfortable truths about control power and decay. But most people didn't get that far because the film's surreal visuals stole the conversation. Censors in the United Kingdom and United States weren't sure how to handle its imagery, with several cuts demanded to tone down scenes deemed too suggestive. In some European countries, screenings were delayed for fear audiences would riot or laugh the film off the screen. Critics at the time called it incomprehensible, with some even walking out of press screenings. Yet others defended it as daring, surreal, and years ahead of its time. Over the decades, Zardoz built a cult following, with audiences embracing its absurdity as part of its brilliance. The controversy didn't bury it, it gave it a second life. Sometimes the strangest misfires spark the most conversation, and Zardoz remains proof that sci-fi can be weird, messy, and unforgettable. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. Imagine a future so bleak it's almost funny. A Boy and His Dog takes place in a wasteland where survival is grim, brutal, and absurd. The twist? The boy is guided by his telepathic dog, who becomes both companion and conscience. The film, adapted from Harlan Ellison's novella, quickly stirred up outrage. Its unapologetically dark humor and harsh vision of humanity in collapse didn't sit well with censors. In parts of Europe, screenings were banned outright, with officials calling it too disturbing and anti-human. In the United States, critics argued whether it was satire or simply cruel. What set it apart was its refusal to offer comfort. While other dystopias hinted at hope or rebellion, this one laughed at the very idea. Censors pushed for changes, but director L.Q. Jones stood by his vision, insisting that the bleakness was the point. Audiences were deeply divided. Some praised its originality and wit, while others were horrified. Yet its influence is undeniable. It paved the way for later post-apocalyptic films that embraced both brutality and dark humor. Even decades later, filmmakers cite it as a daring template. A Boy and His Dog didn't just challenge censors, it challenged viewers to decide whether the joke was on the characters or on us. Crash, 1990. 6. Can a film about obsession and machines be too much for audiences to handle? David Cronenberg's Crash dared to ask. It told the story of people drawn together by the aftermath of highway accidents using metal and impact as a strange emotional language. From the start, controversy followed it everywhere it screened. In the United Kingdom, entire regions banned the film outright, with some London councils refusing to allow theaters to show it. In North America, it battled for release with debates over its rating narrowly avoiding harsher restrictions that would have destroyed its box office potential. Critics argued whether it was art satire or simply exploitation. The polarizing response only fueled its reputation. What censors struggled with wasn't graphic content alone, it was the tone. Cronenberg presented it in a detached, almost clinical way, making audiences feel complicit rather than safely entertained. For some, that was unforgivable. For others, it was genius. Despite all the uproar, Crash won the Special Jury Prize at Cannes, sparking further debate about whether film festivals were endorsing dangerous art or protecting bold visions. Its divisive impact made it a landmark in the conversation about how far cinema should go in challenging viewers. Love it or hate it, Crash forced audiences and censors alike to confront the line between fascination and discomfort and asked what happens when that line is deliberately blurred. Gattaca, 1997. What if your future was decided the moment you were born? Gattaca imagined a sleek, not-so-distant world where genetics determined your path in life. Those with superior DNA had every opportunity, while those considered flawed were pushed to the margins. While the film looked stylish and polished, its ideas struck nerves in real life. Schools debated showing it in classrooms, with some districts quietly pulling it from their curriculum after parents complained it was too controversial. The idea of a future where people are judged not by effort but by biology hit uncomfortably close to ongoing debates about science and fairness. Censors didn't slash entire scenes, but the conversation around the film was heated. Some saw it as a warning, while others accused it of promoting defeatism. Studios worried it was too serious for audiences, and its marketing downplayed the heavier themes, presenting it almost like a thriller. Over time, Gattaca's reputation grew. Scientists, ethicists, and even government committees have cited it when discussing genetic research and policy. That alone shows the film's impact. It jumped from entertainment into real-world debate. Gattaca proved you don't need gore or spectacle to be controversial. Sometimes a clean, polished vision of the future can be more unsettling than the wildest dystopia. The Hunger, 1983. What do you get when you mix immortality with longing? Tony Scott's The Hunger arrived with style to spare blending. Gothic atmosphere with futuristic undertones, starring Catherine Deneuve, David Bowie, and Susan Sarandon. It looked like an art film, but pulsed with a darker edge that rattled censors and audiences alike. Television networks in several countries refused to air. It uncut worried about its imagery and mood. Critics dismissed it as pretentious when it premiered, while others accused it of crossing boundaries just for shock value. But under the surface, it was wrestling with themes of time decay and the price of endless existence. Bowie's involvement added to the mystique. His presence as a fading immortal gave the film an otherworldly weight, and audiences couldn't tell where the performer ended and the character began. Censors targeted its more daring sequences, trimming them for international distribution, and making different cuts circulate across markets. The Hunger didn't break box office records, but it developed a cult following that only grew stronger over time. Its bold visuals, eerie pacing, and haunting performances made it unforgettable. Today, it's often cited as a daring precursor to later films that explored the darker side of immortality. Its legacy. The Hunger showed that controversy isn't just about plot, it's about mood, atmosphere, and a willingness to lean into discomfort. Event Horizon, 1997. Some films are remembered as much for what audiences didn't see as for what they did. Event Horizon is one of them. Directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, it was pitched as a haunted house in space thriller, but what made it notorious were the things censors demanded be cut before release. Reports claim that early versions included scenes so graphic they left test audiences shaken. Paramount worried about the reaction ordered heavy edits. The theatrical cut trimmed entire sequences of chaos and suffering, leaving fans to whisper about the lost footage ever since. Those missing reels became the stuff of legend, fueling Event Horizon's reputation as a movie too extreme for its time. Even in its shortened form, the film caused waves. Critics initially panned it as over the top, but viewers couldn't forget its imagery. The gothic spacecraft, the chilling atmosphere, and glimpses of horrors the studio tried to suppress. Rumors of destroyed footage only deepened its cult status, turning it into a must-see for those chasing forbidden cinema. Over the years, Event Horizon's reputation has transformed from flop to classic. Its controversial release story is part of the reason it's remembered not just as a film, but as a legend about what audiences were never allowed to fully witness. The Matrix 1999. What if the world you know is a lie? The Matrix shattered cinema with its story of humans unknowingly trapped in a simulated reality. Its action sequences became instant icons, but its deeper themes caused headaches for censors around the globe. Released just months before the new millennium, it struck nerves about technology control and rebellion. In some countries, its scenes of defiance against authority were trimmed or delayed, while in schools and community groups, debates raged about whether it was encouraging too much questioning of the system. After tragic events in the early 2000s, The Matrix found itself back in the spotlight, with critics pointing to its imagery as a dangerous influence, even though the film was clearly a work of fiction. Despite the backlash, audiences flocked to it. The bullet time effects, the philosophy hidden inside the action, and the unforgettable imagery of red pills and blue pills made it more than just a blockbuster. It became a cultural touchstone. The Matrix didn't just challenge censors, it changed how movies looked, sounded, and thought for the next 2 decades. Its controversy only cemented its place in history. So, there you have it. 15 films that rattled censors, stirred arguments, and refused to play by the rules. From domed futures to haunted spaceships, each dared to go further than anyone expected. Which of these left the biggest mark on you? And do you think today's filmmakers still take the same risks? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and keep your eyes open because sci-fi never stops testing boundaries.